So we'll pray in a second here. We're going, last time we kind of jumped ahead to the three woes a little bit, but now we're going to go back to the first four trumpets of Revelation. And we're going to be reading out of the book of Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith. So we'll go ahead and pray now. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, please bless us in this study. Please remove all distractions and bless us, Lord, with your Holy Spirit. And may angels come and sit in the seats next to us and just bless us and give us understanding and help us to retain these things that we don't forget them after the study's over. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Okay, so when on your handout I gave you, I want to jump down to the middle of the third page, because I want to get this a little bit more clear, I think, direction than the way Uriah wrote it down. And in the days of, so let me say this, Rome is split into two here, right? Two legs, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when did that happen? That happened in 300 AD when Constantine moved the capital from Italy to Constantinople. Or at least he set up another kingdom or another capital in Constantinople, which is in the country of Turkey. Now, when we read in the Bible, and it talks about, for instance, I didn't give you. If you look in your Bibles, if you have one, doesn't look like anyone has one here, but in Revelation chapter 8 is what we're studying today. This is the first four of the trumpets. It says in verse 9, it says, "And a third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life, died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed." We keep on seeing this, a third and a third and a third. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is Constantine divides it in 300 AD into two kingdoms. But in the middle of your second page, the red highlight with the yellow and the underline, it says, "The Roman Empire after Constantine was divided into three parts. And hence the frequent remarks, a third part of men, etc., in an allusion to the third part of the empire which was under the scourge. The division of the Roman kingdom was made at the death of Constantine among his sons, Constantius, Constantine II, and Constans." He was a bit of an egotist. He named all of his kids after himself. Mm-hmm. It says Constantius possessed the east and fixed his residence at Constantinople, the metropolis of the empire. So Constantius took over where Constantine was in control. Constantine II took over Britain, Gaul, and Spain. So remember, at this time the Roman Empire is all of Europe. What we're studying today, what the trumpets are, is how Rome went from a kingdom ruling all the world into all these divisions. And what made these divisions, divided into 10 pieces, was barbarians. We've already studied or heard that barbarians coming down divided it all up. But we never studied that. We're told that in Daniel 2 because we're explaining how there's 10 toes in the division and they won't cling to each other. But we never go into the trumpets to see where God explains all this. So what we're going to look at is the first three trumpets, or the first four trumpets today. And so we know that it was divided into three different kingdoms. And so going back to the beginning of the front page, go back to the beginning of the front page. He starts off in, well, I'll just read verse 1. Verse 1 is, And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. And I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So this so when it says he had opened the 7th seal, when did that happen?
We opened the book of Daniel.
In 1798, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 1798 is the opening of the 7th seal, because there was 7 seals in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is 1798. So now, this is not saying that we're in 1798. It's saying the 7th seal was in 1798. But these actually go parallel. The seals and the trumpets go parallel. So when it says that the angels were given 7 trumpets, they have 7 trumpets, and they're going to be before the 7th seal. It seems a little confusing there, but anyways, they start before then. So, like I said, 300 AD, then it was divided up in, did it say the year for that? It says the first occurred in 31 AD, and the other in 337. So, between 331 and 337 was the division into 3. So all of the references to a third part of the banner, a third part of that has to happen after 337, right? So now Rome, this is Rome. Rome is in 3 separate parts. You have Italy, and you have Constantinople, and the other part was down in Africa and Thrace, and it was in northern Africa. Constance, it says, held Illyricum, Africa, and Italy. So
Where's Lyricum?
it's probably in North Africa or somewhere like that. But basically, so let me draw a picture of this a little bit. So we got the Great Britain, whatever, and then comes down. Here's Spain and Portugal, and then there's Mediterranean Sea in the boot. Okay, and then there's whatever in Africa and whatever. Okay, so according to this, what it's saying is like Italy and Africa was controlled by one of them. Turkey and the area over here was controlled by another one, and the other one was controlling all the upper parts, right? So when we're talking about 1/3, that means that barbarians are going to attack one of these 3 places. So the first one, okay, let me just read here. It says, and another angel came down and stood at the altar having a golden censer. He has a golden censer, so where are we at in time?
The holy place.
We're in the holy place sometime before 1844.
Yeah.
We don't know when, but sometime before that. It's not after. So it's not a future event then. It's a past event, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If Jesus is still in the holy place, then it's in the past. It's not a future event. All right? So we had a golden altar, or had a golden censer had a golden censer, and there was given him unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar which is before the throne. And what is the golden altar before the throne?
That's the table of shoe, right?
No, it's the
Like
it's the altar of incense before the curtain, but it's still before the throne, because the incense goes up above the curtain to the throne.
mm-hmm.
And it says in verse 4, and the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saint ascended up before God unto the angel, out of the angel's hand. So what angel is this?
Jesus.
This is Jesus. Because Jesus is the only one ministering in heaven as our high priest. He's the one interceding for us. He's the one who's taking our prayers and giving them to the Father, right? He's our intercessor. And it says, the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and cast it to the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Okay, this, like how Daniel goes, Daniel 2, and it has the history. And then we go to Daniel 7, it has the same history. And we have Daniel 8, it has the same history. Even though they're one after the other, they're not one after the other. I mean, the chapters are, but it goes back, it goes all the way through and back to the beginning, all the way through, back to the beginning, all the way through, right? So it's repeating and enlarging, but Daniel 7 doesn't happen after Daniel 2. It happens at the same time. When the head of gold is there, the lion's there. When the silver's there, the bear's there. They're consecutive, right?
Right.
So with the trumpets, which also, if you look at your handout, this might help as we go along too, if you just look at that. Your handout in the back that has the comparison chart that I called it. This one, that the comparison of the 7 churches. Okay, so it said, we just read that there was the 7 seals. We just read about the 7th seal, and that was when at around 1798, because when the 7th seal was opened, then what happened? The book was open,
yeah.
because the seals are closing the book. Now that the book's been opened, so the 7th seal has to end at 1798. Now, so we look at that history, but then the history of the 7 churches is parallel with the 7 seals. In fact, it's exactly the same. So the dates and everything will line up the same, but the trumpets, they're off a little bit and a little differently, but they're still covering the same time period. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyways, it's going to get a little confusing in how the Bible's worded, but I'm going to try to make that clear. And it's not that easy to do. So here it says that and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar, and it came to the earth, and there were voices and thunders and lightnings and earthquake, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. But before that, it says that the smoke was rising up before God from the censer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But here it says that the one who's doing the praying has thrown the censer to the ground. That means that probation is closed. He's no longer listening. He's no longer going to let he's not going to mix your prayers with the incense to go over the curtain. Now, so this is talking about a future time when probation closes, right?
Right.
But when we go to the 7 angels, which were given the 7 trumpets, we're going back again. So we've gone through the seals. Now we're going back to the trumpets. And remember that Revelation, the chapters were divided by man, but in the original Greek, there wasn't a chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. So maybe they should have let these verses stay with the chapter 7 with the seals, because it's still kind of carrying on with the seals, and now it's going into the trumpets. But the trumpets are mentioned in verse 2, so it did that anyways. Please
so
don't.
it was all just one book without any chapters?
That's the way the book was written, yes.
Oh, okay.
And the first angel sounded, and there was no punctuation or chapter or verses or anything like that. So, and the 7th angel, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. And it says, the first angel sounded, and there followed hail mingled with fire and with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. Now,
all the green grass is burnt up. Yeah. Does it say?
I thought I had some. Oh, okay, I'm just going to read this out of Job. In Job 38, 22 and 23, it says, Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? So we heard that there was hail and fire. It says the first thing that sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees was burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. And the next verse says, and the second angel sounded. So dealing with the first angel, that's all it says.
Mm-hmm.
But it's saying a lot. So when we go to the book of Job, it says, I'll read this again. I didn't finish reading it. It says, Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle of war? So it's kind of interesting that Job is referring to hail and snow and talking about a war, when we know that the trumpets are wars, and it mentions the snow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then verse 30, 38, 29, and 30, it says, And out of whose womb came the ice, the hoary frost of heaven, who hath gathered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. But if we go back one previous chapter in Job, verse 37, verse 9, it says, Out of the south comes the whirlwind, and cold out of the north. So when we look at the map here, the first attack on Rome came out of the north. It came out of the colder regions, out of the icy regions. And because these people lived in the snow and the ice, they attacked in wintertime. And almost all battles were fought in the summer, because people didn't like to be fighting in the winter and sieging when they're outside of a castle or something, trying to siege it, and they got no food or anything, and it's cold. They'll wait till spring and then just siege you all year until you run out of food and kill you by fall. But this horde came in the middle of winter, and it's also from the north. And so let's read what it says in the book of Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith. So it says, this verse introduces, verse 2, it says, I saw the seventh angel which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. This verse introduces a new distinct series of events. In the seals, we have the history of the church during what is called the gospel dispensation. In the 7 trumpets now introduced, we have a principal political and warlike events which are to transpire during the same time. So it's not after the seals, it's at the same time of the seals. Revelation 8, 3 through 5, and says, And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and was given him much incense, that he should offer it for the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. Verse 4, And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God and out of the angel's hand. Verse 5, And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it to the earth, and there was voices, thunderings, lightnings, and earthquake. Having, as it were, in verse 2, brought out the 7 angels, the introduction now before us is upon the stage in action. John, for a moment, in the 3 verses last quoted, directs attention to an entirely different scene. The angel which approaches the altar is not one of the 7 trumpet angels. Now remember, so when there's an angel standing at the altar and he's giving the incense, but it says when he was doing that, then 7 angels were given trumpets. So these are not the same angel. So Jesus is not one of the 7 angels, is what it's saying. The altar is the altar of incense, and in earthly approach, the altar is not the 7 trumpet angels. That's what I just said. The altar is the altar of incense, which is the earthly sanctuary, was placed in the first apartment. Here then is another proof that there exists a heavenly sanctuary that is corresponding vessels of service, of which the earthly was a figure. In other words, if he's going to cast this censer down to the earth, then he can't be at the earth. So there's somewhere else where there's an altar and there's incense. So just more proof there's a model just like the one on earth in heaven. That's all it's saying. And now we're just going to skip down to the highlighted parts, and I'm trying to fill in the rest because it gets really wordy, and I'm going to do my best to make this not too boring. This is not the most exciting, fun study, but it's something we need to do because then we'll understand it and we'll be through it. And then we go to the woes in Islam, and you'll be all happy. Oh, so it says, so in the next yellow part, it says, and there were here carried forward to the end, is evident from the act of the angel in filling the censer with fire and casting it to the earth. For when his work is for his work is then done, no more prayers are to be offered up mingled with incense, and this symbolic act can have its application only at the time when the ministration of Christ in the sanctuary and the habit of mankind has forever ceased. So, going down to the bottom of the page, Revelation 8:7. And the first angel sounded, and there followed hail, fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and a third part of the trees was burned up, and all the grass was burned up. Okay, so Uriah Smith is taking, when he's writing the books of Daniel and Revelation, he's gathering all the information, he's trying to give you a Bible study and teach you the truth. And one of the historians that is really famous, who was a very great historian, is Gibbon. I don't know what the rest of his name is, but they call him Gibbon. And he was, I don't believe he was a Christian. So which makes it even better, because when he says things that back up Christian theology, then it shows he's not biased because he's actually a pagan. What are you looking for?
I was just going to ask you, where do you want me to put this in the folder? The front or the back?
Just put it in the front for now, because I don't. We need more dividers. So, and that way it's right there for you at the moment. So, let me see here for a second. Well, I'm just going to read this paragraph. It says, none could elucidate the text more clearly or expound them more fully than the task has been performed by Gibbon. The chapters of the skeptical philosopher, so he's a skeptical philosopher, he's not a Bible-believing Christian. He doesn't really believe the Bible. That treat directly of the matter need but a text to be prefixed and a few unholy words to be blotted out. So he did a little cursing in his explanations. To form a series of expository lectures on the 8th and 9th chapters of Revelation, little or nothing is left for the professed interpreter to do but to point to the pages of Gibbon. In other words, a historian who's just telling you the history of Rome and Europe in the hordes, the barbarian hordes, when he's given that history, what Uriah Smith is saying is he's basically just taking you through the 7 trumpets. And so, if you just take out all the swear words and any comments that he makes that aren't right, it's pretty much a Bible study on the trumpets. Because that's what happened in history. The trumpets is telling us the history of Europe. At the time when Rome was destroyed and broken up, all of the trumpets are against Rome. It's God's attack on the unholy city of Rome. And so, then it says, the first and heavy judgment which fell on Western Rome in its downward course was the war with the Goths under Alaric. So the first war was the Goths under Alaric. Alaric. Okay, who opened the way for the latter inroads. The death of Theodosius, the Roman emperor, occurred on January 3rd, 395. January of 395. And before the end of the winter, the Goths under Alaric were in arms against the empire. So this is in 395. So Constantine splits the kingdom, and then into two. And then his children successfully break it up into three, and we have these three kingdoms. And now the Goths are coming from the north in the middle of winter and attacking, and they're coming like hail. Hail descends upon the ground, right? And here's this cold hordes descending upon Rome from the north, which hail is a perfect representation of this. And it says, the first invasion under Alaric ravaged Thrace, Macedonia, Attica, and Peloponnese. Well, something anyways. But did not reach the city of Rome. On his second invasion, however, the Goth chieftain arose across the Alps and the Apennines and appeared before the walls of the eternal city, which soon fell prey to the fury of the barbarians. So they came over. I should have done this in two different colors. I'm going to outline the geography again real quick in another color. And the boot. That doesn't really help. Red would have been better. It's going to be worth it to be able to see what we're doing here. This is Great Britain.
What's Great Britain?
Great Britain is the island up here.
There.
There's an island, and then there's like France and
Can you color
Germany
it
and
color it? He did already.
anyway. So
So
they came down, and it says Thrace, and he attacked Thrace. Or are we at here? Macedonia and Attica. So Macedonia is kind of like Greece. So Greece is over here. So he kind of like took out this. I'm going to use green for what he took out, whatever. So he took out like Greece, but then it says in the first attack he didn't get to Rome, but in the second one he did. So he pretty much kind of just invaded this whole area down here. But when he invaded down there, you know, he's coming from the north. So he's a Germanic or ice people up here. So when they're attacking down here, you know, Rome's no longer going to control as much up here. So this breaking apart is starting to break the power of Rome's hold over this entire region, because they controlled everything.
right.
And now this is not only has it done what it did, but it's severely crippled Rome.
Right.
But notice it didn't attack over here or down in Africa, so it attacked 1/3 of the empire, because it's 3 different sections now, right? So that says that, you know, it's going to say 1/3 part of men or 1/3 part of the trees, right?
Right.
Because it didn't attack over this third or that third; it only attacked that third. So, and the Bible never says in the whole world; it just says 1/3 part of men. It didn't say all the men on the planet, but all the men that we're talking about, 1/3 of those men.
Right.
So, then it says, hail and fire mingled with blood were cast to the earth. The terrible effects of the Goths invasion are represented as hail from the fact of northern origin of the invaders. Fire from the destruction by flame of both city and country, and blood from the terrible slaughter of the citizens of the empire, and by blood and bold and intrepid warriors. Now, moving down to the next highlighted area, it says the Goth nation. Now, these are different quotes from different historians. So, It's in the book of Daniel and Revelation, but these are written by other people than him. It says the Goth nation was in arms at first sound of the was in arms at the first sound of the trumpet, and in the uncommon severity of winter, they rolled their ponderous wagons over the broad and icy back of the river. The fertile fields of Pocius and Boita were crowded with a deluge of barbarians. Males were massacred. The females and cattle were flaming. Of the cattle of the flaming villages were driven away. Deep and bloody traces of the march of the Goths could easily be discovered several years later. The whole territory of Attica was blasted by the baneful presence of Alaric. The most fortunate of the inhabitants of Corinth, Argos, and Sparta were saved from death by beholding the conflagration of their cities in a season of such extreme heat that the beds of the rivers were dry. Alaric invaded the dominion of the west, and so he's probably bringing ships or whatever, and he didn't want to go through the dry beds for some reason, and saved some of those cities. The secluded old man of Verona, a poet Claudian, pathetically lamented the fate of the contemporary trees, which must blaze in the conflagration of the whole country. A third part of the trees was burned up, and the emperor of the Romans fled before the king of the Goths. So when these guys came in, they just massacred everyone, and they burnt everything, and it just left nothing in its path, so that years later you could still tell they had come through this area. So that is the first trumpet. And so we're still going to read a little bit of the first trumpet again. It says in the next highlighted spot on the page 2, or page 3 of 8, it says the union of the Roman Empire was dissolved. This genius was humbled in the dust. The armies of unknown barbarians issuing from the frozen regions of the north had established their victorious reign over the fairest princes of Europe and Africa. Then we read that about Constantine, and now we're going to go to the second trumpet. So the second trumpet, looking here, is telling us that 428 to 468 was the next time period. The next barbarian tribes came in. 428 to 468. And it says, I'm going to read the verse, and that's verse 8, and it's 8:8. And the second angel sounded, and it were as a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood. And a third part of the creatures were in the sea, had life, died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed. Okay, so here we have a lot of stuff going on in the water. Now it says here, the history illustrative of the sounding of the second trumpet evidently relates to an invasion and conquest of Africa and afterwards Italy by the terrible Genseric. So now we have Genseric. He is the second barbarian leader that's going to continue to attack. Now, Genseric is in the south because he first conquers Africa and then Italy. So he's going to be conquering in this area down here. And it says his conquests were for the most part naval, and his triumphs were as it were a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. What figure would better or even so well illustrate the collision of navies and the general havoc of war on the maritime coast in explaining this trumpet? We are to look for some we are to look for some events which have a particular bearing on the commercial world. The symbol used naturally leads us to look to the agitation and commotion. Nothing but a fierce maritime warfare would fulfill the prediction. But the sounding of the first four trumpets relates to the four remarkable events which contributed to the downfall of the Roman Empire, and the first trumpet refers to the ravages of the Goths under Alaric. In this, we naturally look for the next succeeding act of invasion, which shook the Roman power and conduced to its fall. The next great invasion was that of the terrible Genseric and the Vandals. Okay, so these are the Vandals. Do you remember who was removed for the papacy to come in? It was the Ostrogoths, the Vandals, and the Heruli. So this barbarian horde will be wiped out eventually by the Romans, so the papacy can come into place. So let's go to page 4, top of the page. It says, but Genseric was saved from the impending and inevitable ruin by the treachery of some powerful subjects, envious or apprehensive of their master's success. Guided by their secret intelligence, he surprised the unguarded fleet in the Bay of Cartagena. Many of the ships were sunk, taken, or burned, and preparations for 3 years were destroyed in a single day. So Rome is trying to get ready for an inevitable battle with Genseric. And because of someone doing a little spy work and betraying the Romans, the Genseric came up and wiped out 3 years worth of naval preparation and just wiped out the fleets of Rome. And so in the meantime, now that they can't protect their waters, Genseric and these barbarians are just raiding ships and pirating everything in the whole Mediterranean. So the Romans aren't in control of the waters. So they're just being victims of highway robbery all day long, and the barbarians are just stealing everything they can get their hands on. So going down to the bottom of the page, it says, in the big paragraph there, just above the 3 lines above the underlined part, it says, after the failure of this great expedition, Genseric again became a tyrant of the sea. The coast of Italy, Greece, and Asia were again exposed to the revenge and avarice. Tripoli and Sardinia returned to his obedience, and added Sicily to the number of the provinces before he died. In the fullness of the years of glory, he beheld the final extinction of the empire of the West. So, at this point, this part of the empire is extinct. Constantine's over here, and he's not alive anymore. But the kingdom of Rome and Constantinople is still untouched, and this is still underneath. But this area has been also removed by Genseric. So now that covers. Well, let's read one more part here in the highlight. It says, Genseric, a name which is the destruction of the Roman Empire, has a deserved equal rank with the names of Alaric and Attila. So now we come to verse 9. No, to verse 10. And it says, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven. And you asked me before about wormwood, and we're going to get into that because I now have an answer.
Oh, you figured it out?
Well, that's what they say, so.
Yeah.
And the third angel sounded, and fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So let me say this. We're reading the highlights to get this study through and not make it too boring. But this whole thing is the story of the first 4 trumpets. So it's good if you go back on your own time when you're just reading and read through the whole thing and read all of it, not just the highlighted parts.
Right. Okay, can you get back to that wormwood part?
We're not there yet. So, and so then it says, okay, well, here it's already, I just repeated it again. It says, I'll just read it. The third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and a third part of the rivers became wormwood, and many men died in the waters because they were made bitter. Okay, so now the highlighted part says, there should be some chieftain or warrior who might be compared with a blazing meteor, whose course would be singularly brilliant, who would appear suddenly like a blazing star, and then disappear like a star whose light was quenched in the waters. That the desolating course of this meteor would be mainly on those portions of the world which abounded with the springs of water and running streams. That an effect would be produced as of those streams and fountains were made bitter. That is, that many persons would perish, and the wild desolations would be caused in the vicinity of those rivers and streams, as if the bitter and baleful star should fall upon the waters, and death should spread over the land adjacent to them, and watered by them. It is premised that the trumpet has allusion to the desolating war and furious invasions of Attila.
Oh, Attila the Hun.
Attila the Hun. Now, where'd the Huns come from?
The Hun?
The Huns.
They were Mongolians.
Mongolians, that's
Oh
right.
yeah, Mongolia.
So they came over from Asia, Upper Asia, and came into the northern parts of Europe. But in Italy, they're surrounded. I'm not sure where the Alps are, but there's the Alp mountains. Okay, the Alps.
Mm-hmm.
They came across the Alps, and when they came across the Alps, all the water, all the streams and the fountains originate in the mountains. That's where all the water comes down from.
Oh, and then the death is...
So when it's talking about this star, this great star coming from heaven, and it came like a burning lamp upon the water, upon the rivers and the waters. It's saying it came from where the waters come, and it was Attila, because unlike some of the other hordes, Attila was like, he stood out among all the Mongolians. He was a Mongolian among the Mongolians.
But he was a barbarian.
He was a barbarian.
Yes,
he's
he was
attacking
a
Rome.
barbarian.
He was one of the worst ever in history.
Yeah, and he's probably, so when these guys were taken out, so there's still like Romania and other places. So, I mean, I don't know where the Appalachian Mountains are, but anyways, point being, he came in and took over any of the provinces that were still in the Roman dominion, because Rome, Italy is already fallen. That side's gone. They're not even in control anymore. So whatever Constantinople's controlling, Turkey and part of Europe, maybe some of the Holy Land or whatever area that's covering, because this was all Rome. Then Attila came in and he's attacking a third part. She's attacking the Constantinople area.
But I wonder why they're referring to him as some lamp or something like that, or
Well, let's see what it says, because there might be some more here. So,
because he was a horrible person.
and there's a lot more stuff that I'm not reading, which might answer some questions that I'm not going to answer, because
That's why I kind of took that one kind of more literal, because the way that it's described doesn't really.
Right, but see, everything that we are describing turns out to be something like real sensible, like an army in a war and a battle or whatever.
I get it, but
So,
I would never put that in with it.
It's because our mind wants to imagine exactly what it hears. It doesn't want to interpret the hearing. So our
Right.
mind's over here
Yeah,
immediately, and we
it's
need to
like-
bring it back into subjection to, okay, we need to study this in interpretation.
Written like in code.
Right.
Right.
So let's read the next highlighted part,
Because.
and it says, it is said particularly that the effect would be on the rivers and the fountains of waters. If this has a literal application, or if it was supposed in the case of the second trumpet, the language used was such as had to a portion of the empire that would be particularly affected by the hostile invasion, when it may suppose that this refers to those. Man, I wish he would not make long sentences that don't make any sense.
And who is he?
Whoever's writing this, because Uriah Smith is getting quotes from other writers, so I don't know who he's quoting. Oh, I think it's above it says Mr. Barnes has this note, so it's whoever Mr. Barnes is.
Yeah.
But let me try to get to the next period somewhere here. Let me just go start here. It says, those in which the rivers and streams had their origin, for the effect was permanently in the fountains of waters. As a matter of fact, it's not getting any better. Attila were in the regions of the Alps, in the portions of the empire whence the rivers flow down to Italy. The name of the star is called wormwood, denoting a bitter consequences.
Yeah.
Okay.
His wormwood.
Says the total expiration and erasure are terms which best denote the calamities he inflicted. He styled himself the scourge of God. So Attila thought he was on a holy mission from God, and since he was attacking the Roman Empire and the 7 angels were given 7 trumpets, he kind of was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he really was.
So listen to what it says here. It says, one of his lieutenants chastised and almost exterminated the Burgundians of the Rhine. They traversed both in their march and in their return the territories of the Franks, and they massacred their hostages as well as their captives. 200 young maidens were tortured with exquisite and unrelenting rage. Their bodies were torn asunder by wild horses. They were crushed under the weight of the rolling wagons, and their unburied limbs were abandoned on public roads as prey for dogs and vultures.
They just rip people apart with horses.
So,
Light them up and then they just.
so this is where we get some of these sayings, wild horses couldn't tear me away. You know, and so there's just a lot of the sayings we have in our modern vocabulary come
from some real brutal stuff.
some really and out of even the trumpets themselves. So now page 6 it says the boast of Attila was that the grass never grew on a spot which his horse had trod. So he just murdered everything so devastating he just thought it ain't gonna grow back. It's not gonna recover from me. Okay, so that's number 3, and that was Attila.
That's insane.
But now, I'm sure all the way up until now, your entire life, you hear about a third of the trees being burnt. You're waiting for some apocalyptic event when God's going to burn all the trees on 1/3 of the planet.
Well, I was.
That's what I always thought.
Well, I was thinking that wormwood is like a star that's fizzled out and it's gonna come down.
Yeah, a meteor. Because, and you know where you get
Right.
that from? You get that from the Baptist. It's just old thoughts that came in and you don't know where it came from, and it became yours.
And it's like from some faraway planet that's.
And they're going to call the meteor wormwood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how it sounds, and then it's gonna hit the ocean and it's gonna die. Or
Right.
something. I
So-
don't know.
So now that we have a
I'm just saying that's what I
yeah.
so now that we have a
thought.
foundation of knowing that everything in the Bible is about God's people and the little horn. So for the setting up of the little horn, first paganism has to be removed, right? And when does paganism get removed? When does paganism get removed?
When it gets removed,
Paganism has to be removed for what reason?
For
So-
papalism.
For papalism.
Yeah.
When is paganism removed so that papalism can be there? Your favorite little thing I showed you the last time you said, I love that. That's the answers right there.
Oh, 3.
338.
No.
When is
three-
the papacy set up?
457.
The papacy.
The papacy. Yeah, I'm confused.
On the
So
2300 days, not the
538?
beginning of the 2300 days, the papacy.
Mm-hmm.
How long does the papacy rule for?
1260.
Okay, so when does the 1260 begin?
538.
538.
538, right? 538 to 1798.
Mm-hmm.
So the papacy goes from 538
1798.
To 1790.
to 1798. But before the papacy can be set up, paganism has to be removed.
Right.
Yeah,
When is it removed?
508.
508.
508.
By Constantine.
508, as we see on the chart here, it says the taking away the daily sacrifice, which we studied and found out that daily is really paganism. It has nothing, the sacrifice doesn't belong in the text.
Right.
And so this is removed for what? The next event. Whoa, what's that? 538. It's papacy. This removes paganism so that papalism come in. So remove the 10 horns and let the little horn come up and let him rule. And on this side, on the chart, again, in the center line where Christ is at again, just below it, it says pagan dominion or the daily taken away, Daniel 11:31.
What 1131? What?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I'm going to have to look that up because I go to the daily in Daniel 8, verses 12 through 11 through 13, and 11. And this says chapter 12. But this says what is 12? Let's find out what this is. 11:31. Just see what it is real quick. Daniel 11:31. I don't want to be teaching charts and not knowing what that's on the chart referencing. Okay, 11:31. It says, "An arm shall stand on his part." Oh, yeah, okay. So arm shall stand on his part, and he shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and he shall take away the daily, and they shall place the admonition that makes the abomination that maketh desolate.
Desolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we went through that. We talked about, but I don't think we hit this verse. I think we skipped 11.
We eat it.
We did chapter 8, but chapter 8 said the daily and the abomination that maketh desolate. But here it says the abomination. It says the same thing.
Yeah.
The daily sacrifice and the abomination that maketh desolate. Let me go back to 8 and see if I'm still remembering correctly. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. And the host was given unto him against the daily sacrifice by reason of the transgression, and is cast down to cast the truth to the ground, and practiced and prospered. And I heard one saint speaking to another saint, said unto the certain that spake, How long shall the vision be concerning daily and the transgression of desolation to get the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Yeah, we read 8. We didn't even go to 11. But 11 only repeats exactly what we just read in 8, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's referencing Daniel 11:31. It has. So what are these powers? We have the daily and the transgression of desolation. So what is the daily?
The pagan.
Paganism. So what's the transgression of desolation?
Papalism.
Papalism. So we have both sides of the 2520, right?
Right.
Which was going to go 2,300 days from 457, which is exactly 2,520 days from when it actually started, when Manasseh was carried captive at the beginning. Because did the captivity start in 457?
No.
No, because that was in the time of the Medes and Persians, because they were building the city. We got to go back to the beginning of the Babylonians. We go back to there and count the same distance from where the 2,300 goes from the 457, and we end up exactly at the same place at 1844, October 22nd, right?
Yeah.
So there's no difference in the 2300 and the 2520 other than the fact that the 2520 actually has more meaning. 2300 days is only a distance and how far you got to go, but you don't find 2300 in Genesis and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy and all the prophets and everything else.
No.
But you find a 2520 in everything.
Mhm.
From the marrying of Leah and Rachel to the feast and famine of Joseph to the 20 years of Daniel, from when they went into captivity to when they're going to be, the sanctuary is going to be cleansed, from Christ being crucified 1260 days after his first ministration, and after the 1260 morning lambs and 1259 evening lambs, with him being the 60th, his 2520th lamb.
Mhm.
You don't see that with 2300. 2300 was only a distance getting us to a point,
Mhm.
and the point is what the first angel's message was. And what was the first angel's message?
Fear God.
Fear God and give glory. to
Why?
Him For the hour of His judgment.
Because the judgment begins. The first angel's message is just to tell us God's judgment begins here. It doesn't start back in the past, and it isn't a future event. God's judgment starts here. Starts where? We'll count 2300 days from the restoring of going forth to build Jerusalem. And then you'll know when God's going to start the judgment. And when the Day of Atonement is going to happen. So the first angel's message is 1844, but the only way you can get there is to study all this out, because God doesn't tell you the date. He says, when you see the going forth of the decree to restore and build Jerusalem, when you see that, where? After it's been destroyed. When? When the Babylonians destroyed it. And then what happens? Then we have to go all these years, and that's going to go through Greece and pagan Rome, and we get to papal Rome, and that's going to bring us to this date. You can't study any of this stuff without studying all of it, because it all goes together. And anyways, a little bit of a rant there. But just to repeat that the 2300 days is important, but the thing with the 2300 days, it's just a distance, and it brings us to the event we're talking about. Our first goal is to get the first angel's message. After we get the first angel's message, then we get the second angel's message, and then we get the third. But we have to start out at the beginning with the first angel's message, and 2300 days takes us right to there without us having to worry about all the meanings of what it would mean. Because it doesn't have a bunch of meanings. 2520, if we start studying all these other things like Naaman having to wash 7 times to have the leprosy removed, which we all have leprosy, right?
Mhm.
Because leprosy represents sin.
Sin.
So we're all sinners. So we're all leprous in one way. Our soul is leprous. And so for us to be clean, we have to wash 7 times. What does that mean to be washed 7 times? The only thing that washes sin is blood.
Mhm.
But whose blood has to wash it? It's Christ.
Jesus.
So we have to crucify Christ. So what do we have to do? We have to make him bleed from 7 places. From the crown, from the back, from the both
Right.
hands, both feet, and the side.
Mhm.
We have to have his blood sprinkled 7 times upon the curtain
Yeah.
before the mercy seat. Because we can't get rid of this sin without that. So there's all this 2520 all over the place. What the 2300 does by not having a meaning, it simplifies it to keep your focus on just getting to this date. Because the first angel's message is not about all of that. The first angel's message is the judgment begins.
Right.
But the 2520 tells you what's being judged.
Mhm.
That's you and your relationship with God. Because actually, that's the curse. But what is the 2520 first?
The covenant.
It's the covenant. It was a promise made by the Israelites that God, we will obey you, and you will be my people.
Right.
And just again for
The
remembrance,
blessings and curses.
how do we know that that the covenant was 2520?
Leviticus chapter 26.
But how do we know but that doesn't tell us it's 2520? It's Daniel chapter 9 verse 11. Remember 9:11.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel chapter 9:11. When we look at that verse, it says, Let me just read it since I'm
Daniel
close.
chapter 9:11.
Yeah, 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, Yea, all Israel transgressed the law, even departing that they may not obey the voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, and the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. Daniel's saying, we're in Babylon because we sinned against God. We made a promise to God in the days of Moses, and he wrote it down, and we made an oath. But we look up that word oath, and what does that word oath mean?
Covenant.
Covenant.
It means to swear, as in to swear 7 times.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what that means is, in the Hebrew, when you go back to the word swear or oath or covenant, it's going to say, it's not going to say to make a promise. It's going to say to make 7 promises. So the Hebrews don't have a single promise. They only have 7 times. Whenever every promise they make is 7 times, because it's the only promise they have in their language. But it means 7 times. So therefore, when we break His law, we break 7 promises, because we promised Him 7 times we would obey Him. So Naaman has leprosy. So why does he have to wash 7 times? Because however he got that leprosy, he had to break the covenant. So he has, and he's a Gentile. He doesn't actually have a covenant, but this applies to everybody across the earth. We've all broken our. We're all in sin, whether we made a covenant or not. The covenant only allows some of us to get saved. Some people who never had a covenant, they're lost already no matter what. But in order for us to get saved, we have to make a covenant with God and say, Lord, I promise, and I've already broken it, so please will you put your blood on my account and wash me 7 times so that I might remove this leprosy from me and that I might be able to come to the kingdom, right? So, make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go to the fourth angel sounded. Now we are coming up to 468 with the, Attila. What's Attila's time period?
451 to 453.
Where are you seeing that?
The comparison chart.
Oh, the comparison chart. Okay. I just want to see if I can verify that on the pages that I got real quick before I write that up there, but I agree that it's correct. I don't see any dates on this, so I might have to just go with that.
Are you talking about the fold out map, Ron? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just go with the comparison chart for the moment. And it says what?
451 to 453.
451 to...
Invasion of the Huns under himself.
Yeah, 451 to 453. Huh.
Died of 453.
Okay, so 451 to 453. Let me make this point now. Okay, so Genseric, he started in 428 before Attila. But he ended after Attila by another 15 years. So these are consecutive, but they're in different areas. Remember when Rome was being invaded, while one was being invaded over here and fighting his battles, the other barbarians are going like, hey, let's go down here and go over here. Because there's less armies to fight, right?
Honestly, all of this is kind of like unbelievable to me. Like, I don't think women are this violent. Like, men just never stop fighting and killing and, like, aren't they just something
Well,
else,
start
isn't it?
at Genesis and go to Revelation, you'll find nothing but violence.
Well, I know. That's just unbelievable to
Right.
me. Like, my goodness.
Well, and to think that we were made in God's image.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to think that everybody blames women for everything, but man,
Yeah.
men have just really like shed some blood on this.
Well,
All they want to do
ask-
is kill
ask
and
about
conquer,
Deborah.
kill and conquer, kill and conquer.
Read about Deborah.
What?
Deborah.
Deborah.
Who's Deborah?
The woman in the Bible.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, well okay, that's one. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, and
And compared to
there
how
was
many
that
men?
one that took the tent peg and put it through the guys.
Okay, so let's go
Well,
to,
every now and
so
then.
we put a date on that. Now we're going to the fourth angel. And notice all of these dates, they don't go up to 508, right? Because at 508, there are no more pagans. And these are pagans,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we'll put the other one up here. And this is the fourth one. And it is Odesser.
Rainbow or thinking.
Or the A's.
Bound to fail.
Mhm.
They're just
Is it AO or OA?
O D O.
OA.
history
D
and
O
violence.
A.
Mhm.
There's nothing but violence and bloodshed.
Mhm.
So if these Mormons can think for 1 minute that they can live in peace under the rainbow.
Okay.
Let's
Let's reel it in.
It's only a short moment.
Okay, so, and the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten. Now this is getting interesting here. A third part of the sun was smitten, and a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars, so that a third part of them were darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Now, normally when a third is gone, that leaves 2/3 left, right?
Right.
But if we're talking about the entire third, and that's all we're talking about, and it says a third is gone, that means there's nothing left. Not 2/3 left. The other 2/3 were destroyed by the other barbarian tribes, right?
Oh yeah.
So we're dealing with what's left. There's a third left, and here comes. And some of these overlap. They didn't all because there's four groups, but they overlap a little bit. But they still, but some of them, but they still only attacked one region of the three, or part of it, or mostly. So. And here it says, we understand this trumpet symbolizes the career of Odesser, the barbarian monarch who was so intimately connected with the downfall of Western Rome. So we've had the fall of Eastern, or Western, oh. What? We understand the trumpet symbolizes the career of Odesser, the barbarian monarch. Okay, so, I thought Rome was, I guess. Anyways, it says Western Rome fell in 476. So Western Rome would be Italy. So it fell in 476. Let's just read this and I thought this was Eastern Rome, but anyways. We understand that this trumpet symbolizes the career of Odesser, the barbarian monarch who ultimately connected with the downfall of Western Rome. The symbol sun, moon, and stars, for they are undoubtedly here as symbols, evidently denote the great luminaries of the Roman government, its emperors, senators, and councils. Bishop Newton remarks that the last emperor of Western Rome was Romulus, who in derision was called Augustulus, or the diminutive Augustus. Western Rome fell in 476 AD. Still, however, though, the Roman sun was, even though the Roman sun was extinguished, its subordinate luminaries shone faintly while the Senate and the councils continued. But after many civil reverses and changes of political fortune, at length, AD 566, the whole form of the ancient government was subverted, and Rome itself was reduced from being the empress of the world to the poor dukedom tributary of the Exarch of Ravenna. Okay, so now, paganism has been destroyed. These pagan hordes eventually are removed and destroyed. But the Senate has still got control. So when we talk about the removal of paganism to papalism, we're talking about partly about moving pagans or pagan nations who are forcing their satanic gods on you. but also Rome was pagan, but it's going to change and give its power, seat, and great authority unto the beast. So there has to be some authority here in 538 in order to transfer that authority unto the papacy, right? So there's the Roman emperors are gone. There are no more Caesars. Now all we have is counselors and the Senate and stuff. So they're still fighting, and because they don't all get along, the Democrats and the Republicans. So eventually they get to the point where they no longer have any armies. They have no control. The generals have all gone their own direction, because when the state won't pay them, they're not going to die for you. So they lose all their strength. And then what happens is Constantine just starts making it more religious, and he just says, hey, you know what? We're going to give all our power, seat, and great authority into the Pope. That wasn't Constantine. That was later on. Constantine was like 321. So, but anyways, the power, seat, and great authority was given unto the beast. So going down to the bottom of the page, this second to the last, says the power and glory of Rome was bearing rule over any nation became extinct. So at this point, they were ruling all the world. At this point, they're ruling nobody. The name alone remained to the Queen of Nations. Every token of royalty disappeared from the imperial city. She who had ruled over the nations sat in the dust, like the second Babylon, and there was no throne where the Caesar had reigned. The last of the obedience to a Roman prince, which that once august assembly performed, was the acceptance of the resignation of the last emperor of the West. The abolition of the imperial succession in Italy, the son of Rome was smitten. The new conqueror of Italy, Theodoric, the Ostrogoth, speedily arose, and who unscrupulously assumed the purple and reigned by right of conquest. Now, watch this. So here's what we got. We have the Vandals that were under Genseric. They're in power, right? They took over the bottom part, right? They attacked Italy and down in Africa. Well, they haven't been removed, right? They beat up the Romans. They didn't lose. And then you have it says. Well, here it says the new conqueror of Italy, Theodoric the Ostrogoth, speedily arose, who unscrupulously assumed the purple and reign of the right of conquest. The royalty of Theodoric was proclaimed by the Goths March 5th of 493, with a tardy, reluctant, ambiguous consent of the emperor of the East. The imperial Roman power, of which either Rome or Constantinople had been jointly or singly the seat, whether in the west or in the east, now was no longer recognized in Italy. The third part of the sun was smitten till it emitted no longer the faint rays, and the power of the Caesars was unknown in Italy, and the Goth king reigned over Rome. So you have the Goths reigning in Italy, you have the Vandals reigning in the south, and you have the Ostrogoths reigning as well under Theodoric. And so they're still alive, and one of them we read earlier was the Huruli. Odessier was Huruli. I didn't write that up here. Huruli. Something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's who had to be removed. The Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Huruli. So eventually Rome does finally get them out of the way. There's no longer going to be any more Caesars. That's done with. That's over. But now these barbarians who were causing all the trouble, the papacy cannot rule unless it gets rid of these guys, because these guys are the victors. So as soon as these three are removed, then the papacy can assume the throne. So let's read the bottom paragraph again. A new conqueror of Italy, Theodore the Ostrogoth, speedily arose and unscrupulously assumed the purple and reigned by the right of consent. The royalty of the Theodoric was proclaimed by the Goths as the tardy, reluctant, ambiguous consent of the Emperor of the East. The imperial Roman power, of which either Rome or Constantinople had been jointly or singly the seat, whether in the west or the east, was no longer recognized in Italy. Unknown in Italy, the Gothic king reigned over Rome. A third part of the sun was smitten, till it emitted no longer its faint rays. The power of the Caesars was unknown in Italy. The Goth king reigned over Rome. Okay, we're almost done here. We're going to go to page 7. I think we're on page 7. Yeah, we're on page 7, just finishing up. And going down to the bottom, it says, I say, Odieser, chief of the Heruli, a barbarian remnant of the host of Attila, left on the Alpine frontiers of Italy, interposed with his command that the name and the office of Roman Emperor of the West should be abolished. The authorities bowed in submission to him, the last phantom of an emperor, one whose name Romulus Augustus was singularly calculated to bring in contrast before the reflective mind the past glories of Rome and its present degradation. Abdicated, the Senate sent away the imperial insignia to Constantinople, professing to the Emperor of the East that one emperor was sufficient for the whole of the empire. Thus the Roman imperial sun, that third which appertained to the Western Empire, was eclipsed and shone no more. So that was the end of Rome and Italy. And now on page 8 of 8. Apparently these barbarian tribes also fought with each other. So they didn't just attack Rome, because they were neighboring and fighting over things. And it says here in the middle of the top paragraph, it says, Theodoric the Ostrogoth, on destroying the Heruli and their kingdom at Rome, and Ravenna ruled in Italy from AD 493 to 526. So when we saw the Heruli come in, or the Ostrogoths, what's the Ostrogoths? Anyways, never mind. Don't want to make it any more confusing. If we don't understand all of this perfectly, at least we understand it more enough, at least to the point. And my main point or the main reason I want to have this study, I mean, we should all study the Bible and understand it for the best we can. But the main point is to get everyone's mind from taking verses in the Bible, like Revelation, that say a third of the trees and a third of the sea, and thinking that this is an end time event that has to destroy all the trees or all the water. And that may never happen. And again, this is local and literal to Rome, and it's the attacking and breaking up of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire didn't fall apart. It was taken apart by the 7 trumpets of the 7 angels of Revelation. That's what destroyed Rome. And we're only studying the first 4, and we started a little bit into the 5th and 6th trumpets, and the 7th trumpet follows. But instead of these barbarian hordes, this is Islam. And we'll get more into that again as we review and add on. But now, having said that, that does not mean that, just as we were talking about things repeat and enlarge, the Day of Atonement was for how many days?
One day,
One day. And who was it for?
the Israelites.
The Israelites.
Yeah.
They had to get their sins confessed on the Day of Atonement, or they were kicked out of the kingdom of Israel.
Right.
But that didn't affect the pagans. It didn't affect the Moabites, the Philistines. They didn't have a Day of Atonement. But the true Day of Atonement in 1844, that's for the entire world, right?
Right.
And it covers the entire. It covers the entire world, but also covers until Lucifer enters into his 1,000 years.
Right.
Because when Jesus comes out of the holy place, he puts the sins on the scapegoat, and it's head up by a fit man at the end of the day.
It's
Yes.
almost like everything is duplicated. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like why Jesus too, like he duplicates it, like he speaks in parables too, like and then the time, you know what I mean?
Sometimes it has a double application.
Yeah.
But the second application is usually way bigger than the first local literal. So,
It kind of does.
and we see that same thing with the Passover. At the Passover, every time you took a lamb to the sanctuary, who was that lamb for?
Jesus.
Just you.
That's what, yeah. Us.
You were taking your lamb for your sin. You weren't paying for everybody else's.
No.
No.
So it was a local and literal just to you, and it was done quickly in front of the priest with a lamb. But when Christ died, he didn't die for one person, he died for everyone. Not only everyone present, but everyone past and everyone future.
Right.
So when we see that there's all these examples of what the literal of the Bible, when it's fulfilled in the fullest fulfillment, it's like global and bigger and huger. So even though all of these trumpets are not future events, they are historical events, talking about a third of Rome, a third of Rome, a third of Rome. That isn't to say that when God puts his final judgment out and he's going to destroy Babylon, because this is Babylon is destroying, isn't it? The
Right.
Roman Empire?
Right.
But is God going to destroy Babylon again?
Yes.
But is Babylon again going to be a small empire, or is it going to be global?
Global.
The whole world wanders after the beast, right? So is it possible that maybe 1/3 of the earth will burn, or 1/3 of the earth the sea will dry up, or turn to blood, or whatever?
Yeah.
So, and turning to blood, that means that there's a lot of shedding of blood. It doesn't mean the
Right.
water is actually turning to blood, but it could, because it happened in Egypt. The water was turned to blood. And what does Egypt do? Egypt had 10 plagues, right? And what's going to happen at the end of this world? 7 last plagues. But you know, we don't repeat 10 with 7. The first 3 plagues are woe, woe, woe. And as soon as these are done, what's the next thing on the list? Here's
Seven last.
it says, the 7th angel sounded, and it says, the third woe cometh quickly. And what's next? The 7 last plagues.
Whoa.
So you have first plague, second plague, first plague, second plague, third plague, and then 7 more. And what was the difference between the first plagues and the last plagues? The first plagues landed on everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
The 7 last plagues only landed on the Egyptians.
That's right.
So we're going to go through the Islamic phase, but the 7 last plagues, they will not touch us.
Right.
There's going to be, you're not going to have boils. You're not going to have, you're not going to be burnt by scorched by the sun. All the plagues that God's going to pour upon mankind at the end are only on those who don't have the mark or the seal of God in their forehead.
Right.
You mean?
But we're going to go through that time period, and our friends are going to have boils. And we're going to see 1,000 die on one side and 10,000 on the other, yet nothing shall touch us. In fact, we can't be killed at a certain point. At some point it says, and they will see no death. So, but you know the devil's trying to kill you, so, but he can't, because if he could, he would. So, reading Revelation in its true context is a historical thing. Again, everything is repeated, and that repetition can be where your mind went when you first read it. But it's not, but there's no guarantee of that. It doesn't say I'm going to repeat this way, but we do know that this is the proper understanding of these verses as John saw them. And why do we know that? Because Jesus is talking about, I'm at the golden censer. So that means I'm before 1844. Did all these events happen before 1844 while he was in the holy place? So the Bible has given us the literal time of before the 1844 when Jesus was still in the holy place. These angels are being sent. Well, these angels are sent before the holy place. And these angels are sent before the holy place. So, but in 1844, then now we're in the most holy place. So we're looking at the proper understanding, but again, that doesn't mean that it won't repeat in a grander thing in the second application. Because even back to Samson, Samson is repeated. Because what is Samson about?
The church.
Samson is the Seventh-day Adventist church at the end of the world.
I just thought we
Every story in the Bible is God's people at the end of the world. Jonah is God's people at the end of the world. He is supposed to go and give a last warning message to a city that if you don't repent, you're going to die because probation is closed on you. That's our message to the world. Probation's closing, fear God, his hour of judgment has come. Samson was supposed to conquer the Philistines and paganism and take over them because God gave him a great strength that he could do so. Well, he did that for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We've got the Revelation Seminar. He's given us all kinds of power to get the prophecy. He gave us all that we needed to conquer the whole Christian world. But what did we do? Instead of being conquerors, we wanted to be like them. So we started worshiping their idols. So our Philistine is the Baptist church, and our Moabite is the Methodist church. And we go and we start going like, well, I'm going to believe the Holy Spirit like you do, so I'm going to follow your idol, not the true Holy Spirit. Or I'm going to worship Mary instead of Christ. We're going to the idols and not to the true. God gave the Seventh-day Adventists the true. And so, sorry, I'm going through a brain thing here real quick. So Samson has got the power. But where did Samson get his power?
From God. His hair.
His hair.
Yeah.
He got it from God, but the promise was don't cut your hair.
You thought you got your power on your hair.
So, what do we have? If Adventism is Samson, and Samson lost something, and Samson did lose his hair, that means that Adventism lost something that represents his hair. Is there anything special about his hair?
Well, it was just long and it was nice. And
It was kept in 7 locks.
oh, I didn't know
And
that.
so you cut each one of those locks off, and then he's got no hair. 7 locks or 7 times removed. We no longer teach the 25-20. We've lost all the stuff we've been studying, how we line it out on the board, how it makes everything come together.
Oh, that explains it. Okay.
You know what? You take the hair off, and all this information I'm giving and sharing, it's all pieces. It doesn't belong together. It doesn't fit.
You don't.
The glue of everything in the Bible is the 25-20. It's the whole Isaiah is just saying, hey, listen, God's getting pretty upset with your wickedness, and if you don't watch out, He's going to punish you. The curse is coming. The 25-20 is coming. Your cup's almost full. You're going to drink it pretty soon. And then the people said, oh, yeah, we don't need to listen to you. And they want to stone the prophets. And then Jeremiah comes, and he says, look, man, I don't even want to be a prophet, but God told me that if you guys don't start getting figure this out, the Babylonians are coming down and getting you. And he's going like, no, man, the Egyptians, man, they're going to come and save us. We made a deal. And he says, no, they're not. They're already turned around.
Yeah, who said they don't want to be a prophet?
Jeremiah.
Oh.
Jeremiah didn't want to be a prophet. And what's really nice, which I really think is like a touching of God, is that he gave him Baruch to be a companion, and therefore he didn't have to do it alone, which is not a fun job.
Right, because some people just aren't cut out for it. But
Right, and
maybe there was nobody else.
And even Moses got Aaron, but God's first choice was Moses without Aaron. His first choice is Jeremiah without Baruch. But because of their neediness or feeling of lack of ability, they plead with God, please, help me or something. So, and God is merciful and he does that. But, so Samson lost his hair. Well, that means that this is something that's got to be gone away. Well, the only thing that has gone away from Adventism since the pioneers that's on these charts is the 2520, and one other thing is missing.
Ellen White,
What's the other thing missing?
the spirit of prophecy.
No, because we still have that. It's Islam.
Oh, that's where.
We don't teach Islam. So there's.
Well, that's
No,
because
we
it's not
don't.
politically.
So when did Samson have Islam? When he had the jawbone of the ass, because the ass is a representation of the sick men of the east, or the children of Ishmael, or the east wind. It is the representation of Islam, and with Islam in his hand, in other words, Adventism, with the truth of Islam in its hand, was able to conquer the entire army with the jawbone of an ass.
Right.
How did Adventism conquer the world in 1840?
With the revelation of the
Because it was the message of Islam that they had said 2 years before that in August 11th, 1840, this empire is going to end, and it ended on that day, and that made Adventism go like wildfire across the planet.
Right.
The strength was there, but the tool that was in the hand of that strength of the Advent message was Islam. But we stopped teaching it. So now Adventism, what happened immediately after this, that we got removed the 2520? What happened when they cut his hair off? The first thing that happened is they took his eyes.
His power.
his eyes,
They took his eyes.
eyesight.
Yeah.
They burned his sockets out.
His eyes.
So Adventism is now blind. Just like Jonah is asleep at the bottom of the boat.
Right.
And Jonah's still asleep. And Samson is still pushing the mill in the basement of the pagan temple,
With his blind.
which is representing the grinding of bread or grain or the word of God or whatever, but he's doing it blindly. So he might be studying the Bible, but he ain't learning nothing. But he prays and he says, Lord, I've messed up. Jonah, after he's been in the fish for 3 days, he's going to say, I messed up, Lord, I'm sorry. And God's going to put Jonah on track. And God's going to take Samson, and he's going to place him where he can take down all of paganism. And more people die in that than all the people that he killed when he was doing this thing. But for us, doesn't mean necessarily killing. It means the killing of the paganism. It's making Christians out of people. Our weapons are the weapons of turning the enemies of God into the Christians.
Right.
Samson's not trying to kill everybody. He's trying to convert them. But his power, because the Seventh-day Adventist Church wasn't raised up to kill all the bad guys.
No.
Seventh-day Adventist Church was raised up to save all the bad guys.
Right.
But when we have no power and strength, then the enemy wins. And our eyes are taken out, and we have no message. But as Ellen White says that we have no new message, but the messages that were given to us from 1843, 1844, in that time period, in that area. That's been our message. It has been ever since. She says that in 1905. So anyways, that's a quick rundown of what we've already said like a bunch of times, but we're going to keep saying it because it just sums it up. And if you're not getting it, I resum it again to see if you can realize that this all fits together. Everything in the Bible is talking about the same thing. And almost every prophet in the Bible talks about the day of the Lord. So when we start to understand the day of the Lord, which means we have to understand 1844 until the second coming, when we figure that out, then we realize that every prophet is giving us a snapshot of some point in time between 1844 and the second coming. Because one prophet will say, Ellen White will say, on the day when the decree goes forth, well, the decree goes forth at the Sunday law. So we're going to say the day of the Lord is Sunday law, but there's other verses that say the day of the Lord when the towers fall. Well, that's 9/11. And when we study that, I'll prove it to you. And if you don't want to believe it after that, well, you can't prove some things to some people. But it's all throughout the Bible, and all the prophets talk about it. So when you put all the prophets together, and they're all talking about the same thing.
I heard that kind of before somewhere. We talked about it, but I can't remember it. But are you going to talk about that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, and it's coming up quickly because now we're getting into Islam, and that's going right into 9/11, and then after that,
Jonathan Kahn talked about 9/11.
what's that?
Jonathan Kahn talks about.
Oh, yes. And Jonathan Kahn, he talks about it from a way that nobody else does.
Yeah.
Nobody brings up, we will rebuild, and if you knock it down, we'll build it with stone. That was totally prophetic, and when I watched the news, and every single leader and politician was saying, we're going to rebuild, I realized they all are saying the same thing, and that's not an accident. But you know that was apostasy? Because God punished them in the Bible, and it was the punished people who said, we're not going to take we're not going to take God's punishment, we'll rebuild. So they were trusting in human strength over God. But that's what America did. America said, oh yeah, those Arabs may have attacked us, but we're going to rebuild. Not we're going to come to God and say, God, save us from the Arabs. Not, God, please become our king again and protect us. No, we'll take care of it without you. We can still be pagans, and we can still worship the devil, and we can still be a great America. We can beat our wives, and we can be alcoholics and drug addicts.
Well, you remember they wanted to even take that off the money. They wanted to take "In God We Trust" off the money.
This is why I was appalled when everyone else was happy because they saw these trucks that said America the proud and God bless America. I was ashamed. I was going like, America is pathetic.
When was this? When was this you were talking?
And now listen, I understand this. I am very patriotic now because I'm patriotic because America is made up of a bunch of sinners who are doing their best, and there are more Christians than we know. Not the best ones, but they're doing the best they know. But at the time, I had only seen the darkness of wickedness because of the life I was living. And I'm looking at this world and I'm going like, how are you going to say God bless you when you're living like the devil? So it was offensive. And I can see how the liberals could feel that way some way. Except,
I know what you're saying.
but the only problem with the liberals is they love Lucifer. They do not respect God. It's not that they're not good Christians. They actually hate God.
At least the other guys tried.
Right. Well, they actually have an affection for God. The other ones hate God.
They actually recognize there is a God.
Right.
And the other people just flat out disregard.
They want to kill all the babies. They want to pervert every life and the children.
God is within you. Whatever you are, the God of yourself.
Right.
Like with all this stuff.
So we threw a little stuff on the end because we had a break for a second, and now we're just going to close up here with the last part of this sheet, just because it's out here. And so it says, fearful was the calamities brought upon the empire by the first incursions of these barbarians. They were comparatively light as contrasted with the calamities which were to follow. And what's to follow? Woe, woe, woe.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
All right.
They were but the preliminary drops of shower of they were but as preliminary drops of a shower before the torrent which was soon to fall upon the Roman world. The three remaining trumpets are overshadowed with the cloud of woe as set forth in the following verse. Revelation 8:13. And I beheld, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. Now, when we find out clearly, and we study this, and we look at the dates and what happened, there's no question that this is Islam. And if this happened after this, then there's no question that this happened earlier than these dates. So we know we're at the right time period, and we know that we're at the right subject, and this is the proper understanding. And if anyone in our church or anyone else theologically disagrees with this, they are completely outside of every Bible rule. They're not following Christ in the sanctuary, and they are not following history, and history and prophecy doth agree. The angel is not one of a series of the 7 angels, but simply one who announces the 3 remaining trumpets are woe trumpets, on account of the more terrible events to transpire under their sounding. Thus, the next or 5th trumpet is the first woe, the 6th trumpet, the second woe, and the 7th, the last one in the series of the 7 trumpets, is the 3rd woe. Okay, so that was our study. And one of the hardest ones to get through and a bit boring, and hopefully it didn't take too long so people will watch it. But
Not actually that bad.
no, it's just the reading part. It's better when I'm talking and showing things, and I have more. And my drawing's not so bad. This is really bad.
It's about when we started talking about, not Genghis Khan,
Attila?
Attila the Hun, and you start bringing like history, and I start piecing the history in my mind, and then you start talking about, we wrapped it up like
Right.
the salmon, and all with what's going on in the world today.
And that's what
It
happens.
all just kind of brings it around.
And that's what happens here when you get to
You do
Greece and you go, oh, Alexander the Great. I've heard that name.
Yeah. It's
You don't really know who he is,
history.
but you know that he's great because he's Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
So
But no, it's kind of like what this one did is it kind of really does bring it together with like the events throughout history, and you're like, wow, the Bible is a history book. It kind of really brings that together.
well, what's nice is when you go down, you're not only learning the history of the world, but you're going to learn the name of everybody and their father and their child, all the way from Adam to Jesus through David. And it's a clear line. Now, just real quickly, so let's just do some math here real quick. If you live to be 100 years old, and let's say that somebody is, when you're 1 year old, and you live to be 100, and then someone gets born, and he goes to 100, how many people have to live to be 100 years old to go back to Adam?
Right now?
60.
Yeah, 60.
100 times 60 is how many years this world has been here.
6,000.
That isn't very long.
No.
That's very short. 60 people living to be 100 years old, and we are back at Adam.
Because if you think about it,
So
right.
So at first, and it really doesn't have to go like that because people can live to 100 now, but Adam lived to be 1,000. So it would be one person lives for 1,000, and then 50 people live to be 100 for the rest of the part.
100.
And that'll take you back to Adam.
You're
100 times 60 is 6,000. 6,000 years is 60 people going 100 years. But here's the thing. When you're in school and you're studying this stuff about the Emancipation Proclamation and all these different things and all these dates and all these people, and you're going, this is just like some parts of the history, and it's just some parts of America, and you think that the world was created like 1 million years ago. History seems to be unprecedentedly huge, and like, who cares about all this stuff? It's in the past. But if it's only this big, then history is amazing, and you can study it in a big picture and get the whole thing and understand history from creation to now. And now it's like I'm not only learning a part of history, I can learn all of history, and it's not that much.
I was gonna say, there's that one I was watching, I can't remember now, on Netflix or somewhere. It was about the world and how long it's really been around, and the flood. And they were talking about like the Grand Canyon and how people try to look at the Grand Canyon and look at all the different layers with the dirt. And they go, look around the world. There's more than one Grand Canyon. I mean, there's not, the Grand Canyon is
Right.
But I
It's the
mean,
popular one. It's
yeah,
the pretty one.
It's the popular, the big one.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of thought, and kind of like sparked, so I'm like, wow, that's so true. There's like canyons like this all over the world.
Yeah.
And then
there
it
are.
explained from a Bible point of view. I forget who the guy was that put on the. I wish I could remember.
But you know when they all happened, right?
When they.
4,000 years ago.
Yeah, the.
Yeah,
It
okay.
happened at the flood. These things didn't take millions of years to erode because we haven't been here a million years to erode.
No.
And then I've had Christians talk to me and say, oh yes, well this valley was created by an ice age.
See,
There's no such thing as an ice age.
They debunked.
There has never ever been an ice age on this planet because if you look at, first off, before the flood, this was a tropical paradise from top to bottom.
Right.
When the waters that surrounded the earth were brought down and the fountains of the deep were burst open, then what happened was, and Ken Hovind shows us the best way, is when you have a round globe and the sun is shining at the equator the hottest, it's going to be the hottest at the top of the ball, right? Mm-hmm. So as it's spinning, this becomes desert. But as it glances off the edges, like at wintertime, we can still see the sun, but it's at a farther angle away, and it's still cold. We can see the sun, but we're not getting the heat anymore because it's just glancing off of us. And so this is all going to freeze. Mm-hmm. Exactly what you'd expect if you take away. But when it had the outer ring, the heat would hit the ring, and the air would in between here was like insulation, and it was a perfect all the way around. It was a terrarium.
It was
Right.
We were in a greenhouse. Talk about a greenhouse effect.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
So, but here's the thing. If you look at the desert,
before the flood.
the desert,
Rain.
I'm gonna do a little Ken Hovind thing real quick, but if you look at the desert grows every year like about a foot or so. So if it was like 5 miles and 50 feet, next year it'll be 5 miles and 51 feet. And if you keep on incrementing it, if you were to measure 1 foot back every year, it would take you back 4,000 years to the beginning. The first day it was hot, and it took a year to get a foot of dead sand burnt around the center. And if you and also with the moon is which pulls the water all to one side twice a day because of the tides. The moon is going away from the earth. They can tell, they can measure that it's going away from the earth, which means if it's going away, then it used to be closer. And if it's closer, the magnetic pull is going to be magnified by more closer it gets, the more powerful the magnetism comes. And so what would happen is if we went back a million years, you know where the moon would be? The moon would be right here. And you know what would happen? Twice a day, each side of the earth would flood. Because all the water would be pulled to one side, because that water is all going to come to that pole. Right now, with it way out here, it has a slight pull, and it goes up like 5 feet or so and down 10 feet or whatever every time as it's going around the earth. As the tides are moving with the moon.
Right.
So here's the moon, or here's the earth, and then let's say here's the water on the earth. The water is being pulled by the moon, and as it goes this way, this water is going to start going this way, and it's going to be thinner here and wider over here as it goes around, and it's just pulling the water with it. It's drawing, it's pulling, but the earth has got more pull, so it's still staying on the earth, but it's got enough pull like a magnet. A magnet doesn't necessarily strong enough to pick something off the table, but if I put it next to it, I can pull the object with the magnet across the table. Because it has enough pull to move it, but it doesn't have enough pull to pick it up because it's got a bigger pull setting it down. So if the moon was closer, Earth would not be sitting in a little pool waiting for radiation to turn it into a little frog or a little amoeba, because the water would be flooding and draining, and there'd be no stagnant pools sitting there collecting so that a lightning bolt could hit it and turn it into a life form. So, but if the Earth is only 6,000 years old, then the moon used to be here. If it's millions of years, it used to be here. But if it's 6,000, is only moving a little bit. And in 6,000 years, it's only moved so far. And it's not a big deal. But if we, and in the future, it won't be a big deal either, because in the new world, if it just keeps going out further, it's never going to make it get worse. It'll just mean the water doesn't move as much. But again, we're not going to have that much water, because you know why? Because God's going to restore the earth. And where's the water going to go?
I hope it comes here.
It says there's going to be no more seas, right?
No.
In heaven. You know why? Because the seas are going to be above your head. Because God's going to restore the canopy. And now, when the sun hits the canopy, it's going to be 72 degrees all the way around the planet.
I know, but hey, what if you like to go swimming?
There's still going to be pools of water, but there won't be any oceans. So watch this. Nobody wants to swim in the ocean either. They go like a little bit in the waves and they run back.
Yeah.
So
Well,
now, hold on. Let me just say this. So,
lots of people.
so at the time when this water was broken down and everything was 72 degrees, it was hot, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's just doing their thing. So there's animals and plants all over the earth, green, right? So up here on the top, there was mammoths. You know, with their big tusk or whatever, big mammoth up there. And the mammoths up in Alaska froze with grass in their mouth. They froze while chewing.
Wow.
They were sitting there eating grass, and it's like if you've ever saw like the movie The End of the World or something like where like the cold comes down. These new movies about the climate change, and the cold comes down and everything just freezes instantly.
Is it a good movie?
I don't know. I'm just saying that they show the